Drip marketing season is finally here once again, and you guys already know the deal. We have our new S rank characters coming in within 1.7, and I have a lot of things I want to go over for these characters because they actually look really sick once again. So far, Zenless really doesn't disappoint with at least character designs, and if you guys haven't seen who we have yet, we have Vivian and Hugo joining us for 1.7, aka Mockingbird. To start off, we're going to be going with Vivian because she was the first one that was revealed for the drip marketing, which more than likely means that she's going to be on the first half of the 1.7 patch. For starters, the first thing we want to go over with Vivian is that she is our first S rank Ether Anomaly character. We are slowly filling out the Ether roster, which if you guys didn't hear, one of the main things that the developers of the Zenless team stated is that they want Ether characters to be rare. So whenever we get an Ether character, is a very big thing because more often than not, they're here to make a very lasting impact on what the things that they can do. And since this is our first Ether Anomaly, I expect her to do some really crazy things. But before we get into speculating on what her kit is going to be like, I want to talk about her design a little bit and what does that kind of give off to me. And first off, what we can see is that she seems to be a vampiric character, her and both Hugo. And from what we can see is that Vivian's main source of combat is going to come from her using her umbrella. Now this isn't something that's unheard of in like any combat or even fighting games, and there's different ways that can go about it. For instance, she can be able to sheath the sword within the umbrella's hilt, allowing her to be a more close combat character, kind of like miHoYo. But I feel like Vivian will probably be a little bit more floaty in a sense, kind of like a Mary Poppins with a sword or something. Or they could go down the route of her umbrella being able to shoot out projectiles, which is another big thing that I see in a lot of media as well. I feel like it's going to be more the main route they're going to go down because recently we've been getting a lot of melee focused characters, so I'm pretty sure they want to deviate from that, as well as that we're getting another melee character tied with Hugo as well. Also, I always got to point out whenever my fighting game brain goes off, her core design, like how she overall looks, reminds me a lot of a character named Rachel from BlazBlue, who also matches a similar aesthetic of having big poofy dress. I believe Rachel is a vampire as well in BlazBlue. But one of the main things that comes about when talking about Vivian, does this mean Julian power creep? And I don't believe so, because just like every other Anomaly unit in the game, Anomaly characters has a very tailored to team comp that they go towards that's pretty different from what attackers go for. Now there is a little bit more crossover now due to there being synergy with attackers and anomalies through the use of Astra. But when it comes to their core team comps and the things that they functionally want to work with, a lot of times they don't really cross over too much. So with the Julian, one of her main teams that you can always go for is Chingy Nicole Jian, so she'll always have a home there when it comes to her performance of having a full team structure. But another team that a lot of people are using are Astra and Nicole, which isn't something very stricken to Jian herself, but it benefits Jian a lot because she gains the ether bonuses that she gets from Nicole due to her being an ether unit, and so would Vivian. But since that's a hyper carry comp, that isn't a dedicated comp for those characters specifically, because Astra and Nicole just works well with almost any DPS agent within the game. Also, depending on when you joined into Zenless, will kind of determine if you should be going for Vivian or not. If you've been here since 1.2, then you've been someone that's been able to heavily invest into the Anomaly meta, which means that being able to pick up Vivian would be a very valuable pick for you because you have so many other characters that you can mix and match different teams with in order for Vivian to perform well. But if you're somebody that just got here within, let's say, 1.4 where miHoYo released, then your only other pairing that you currently have at the moment is if you use her on a miHoYo team, which will more than likely be strong. But if you already have a complete miHoYo team, then you end up leaving one of your characters out of that mold. You can also go for some of the rerun characters that we have coming up, like with Bernice, so you can do a Bernice and Vivian team, but that depends on how much you want to invest into Anomaly meta in order to make Vivian work. Which, speaking of miHoYo, Viv is going to be buffing her overall performance as well. Ether Corruption, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest damaging anomaly effect within the game, so pairing that with the highest damaging DPS in the game, that just sounds like an insane pairing to have, and is one of the main reasons why I like personally running miHoYo and Julian together on my Astra team. But since Viv is an anomaly unit, you're going to be being able to trigger those anomalies a lot faster than I ever would with my Julian, which sounds like an amazing pairing and a really strong team if you're going to be going for an anomaly meta comp. Now, something that we learned earlier on about Vivian, not tied to her drip marker, but with the new disc set we're going to begin within 1.6 Faith and Melody, we get to actually learn a lot more about what type of anomaly character Vivian will potentially be. Based off some of the details that we've seen from her, she actually might be similar to Bernice, where she's going to be an off-field anomaly character. And why we say this is because if we read the 4th piece set, we see that it says while any squad member using the EX special attack, the equipper's anomaly proficiency increases by 45 for 8 seconds. If the character using the EX special attack is not the equipper's ether damage is increased by 25%. And so when seeing that she gets buff from other characters on her team using their EX special and not her, this sounds like that she's going to have a much more off-field presence in order to let her teammates set ups so that she can come in and set up for her team or set up while she's off field, which sounds very interesting. I feel like she might not be as super heavy off field as Bernice, but I think at minimum they want her to play a quick swap play style, allowing her to be on and off the field pretty consistently. I think this is great because this will help differentiate the type of off field unit her and Bernice can be, and they can do some other things even more by potentially changing how they overall buff their team's damage. We know that Bernice, as she applies her fire anomaly and while her teammates are attacking the enemy, essentially the DPS for her team increases. Vivian, I think they could go down a route of making it so that maybe when she applies her anomaly effects, she can increase the anomaly effects of her other teams or very specific elements. Maybe she could buff the damage of like Frostburn, or maybe she could just buff the damage of Frost in general. But I think a more stronger application where we're getting to now, where a lot of characters want to be more universally supported, I think that maybe she could buff all types of anomalies, which would be very interesting to see. Overall, for what I'm seeing so far, Vivian is looking pretty nice, and I'm actually kind of interested in seeing how she's going to overall play out once we get our hands on her. I think my main draw to her is her being an ether anomaly unit. I'm really interested to see how she's going to operate, but when it comes to like a character design, she really isn't my specific taste. But enough of Vivian, I want to talk about my boy, my man, Hugo. Hugo is an S rank ice attacker. Yes, Ellen power creep has arrived once again. I know all my Ellen mains, you guys are tired of us getting new ice DPS. You guys didn't even last, it hasn't even been what, 3-4 patches before we got another ice DPS. And you guys are probably wondering, does this now fully put her in the dirt? She's going to be okay. She's still going to be able to perform and clear stuff, but his inclusion definitely does hurt her even more than how miHoYo was hurting her, especially once we see how well he's going to perform. And at worst, we know he's at least going to perform way better than how Ellen is, just because Ellen is a 1.0 unit and Hugo is being one of those DPSs getting really close to the 2.0 line, making him more than likely going to be placed around one of the strongest DPS characters within the game. But before we get into that, we need to talk about my boy's design. Like I mentioned earlier, he's a vampiric character, and something that you don't notice is his drip marker, but we notice within the trailer for 1.6, he wields a scythe within the suitcase that he carries. So when seeing him like that, this character reminds me of two specific fighting game characters, which overall matches the vampiric theme of Hugo, and a little bit of the design and how he wields his scythe within a little bit of media that we've seen of him. And those two characters are Ragnar the Blood Edge from Blaze Blue and Gordo from Under Night in Bird. He reminds me so much of them too, especially with, I can't remember what the wording is for having two different eye color, but I'm pretty sure that is something that Ragnar has. And the overall movement that we've seen with Hugo, how he wields his scythe, it reminds me a lot of Gordo. I just always wanted an excuse to talk about fighting game characters. So yeah, that's just my excuse. His design just looks really sick and has me interested. But to kind of bring it back to the Ellen power creep thing, like I was saying before, he's definitely going to be stronger than Ellen. That just is what it is, no matter what type of ice DPS we get from now on. Ellen is always going to be on the lower end, especially for our S ranks, because she's just a 1.0 unit. But I don't think he was specifically made as an ice attack unit to power creep Ellen. I believe his main reason to be made as an ice attack unit was in order for him to be a pairing with Lycan. All of you guys should be aware that him and Lycan are very close. Lycan being a part of the Mockingbirds before he joined Victoria Housing, as well as there's a conflict between him and Lycan within the story. We know at some point that these guys were buddies, they were close friends. And so in order to match the energy and theme and to kind of reminisce about it, they wanted to make it so that him and Lycan work together. And if not mistaken, Lycan's additional ability requires him to at least either be with another ice unit or attack unit and someone a part of his faction. It just sadly indirectly affected Ellen, making her being put in a bit of a worse position. But like I said, if you're somebody that's already invested in Ellen, if your Ellen's still clearing, if she still feels effective, him being introduced shouldn't even really bother you too much, because this means that you can just skip this character, invest into another unit you want, like Vivian or someone else down the line in the future for upcoming patches. Now, what I really want to talk about, which has me interested the most, what would be his potential gameplay style? We're already getting a very basic DPS character coming into the game with Soldier Zero Ambi, so my hope is that with Hugo, this will be us going back into having a bit more complex character that has a much more interesting and intricate kit in comparison to Ambi. I'm hoping he's much closer to a character like Evelyn, Haramasa, or Yanagi. He doesn't need to be difficult or hard to set up. I just want him to have some form of interesting kit that makes him feel like he has a bit of expression that you can perform with him, and makes it so that his rotations are a lot more interesting instead of just like mashing, for instance. I hope that he provides some form of really strong value when it comes to being a great ice DPS character, and all I really care about is for him just to be fun and unique. This is a perfect time for them to introduce another unique DPS character to show that they can introduce new ways these attackers can take advantage of the overall current system within the game and be just as strong as these Anomaly units, because this is something they still need to continue to prove with this class. They've done well with both Soldier Zero Ambi and Evelyn so far, and so we need to continue to see that with Hugo, especially since we have a new Anomaly character stepping into the ring. I think more than likely though, they will probably go down the Evelyn route and either have him maybe manipulate chain attacks, or possibly potentially manipulate things like defensive assists, quick assists, follow-ups, maybe like with the aftershock damage thing with Ambi, so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that they can do with this character to make him interesting. I just really want to see what they come up with him, because there's so much that they can do with him to make him stand out and continue to make attackers look a lot stronger, like how they've been doing with a lot of the recent ones that we've been getting. Now, with that in mind, I think a big question that a lot of people are having or are wondering about these characters is that, will Hugo and Viv have synergy together? This is a big question because a lot of times when getting introduced with faction characters, if they're part of the same faction, they tend to have some form of synergy together. And this is, I believe, the first time we've had two faction characters come out and both of them being DPS units. My guess is that if Vivian is truly an off-field character, and if she potentially, say, provides a buff to some form of Anomaly, or maybe some form of overall damage buff as well, it'll be some way to directly buff Hugo, or maybe Hugo receives a buff whenever an enemy is affected by Anomaly. Somehow, some way they're gonna make it. I feel like they're gonna make it so that these characters work together and are part of some form of team, just because we're in a meta now where having a dual DPS is a very sustainable option, especially with the inclusion of Astra. And I think they want to continue to push that narrative and allow us to mix and match these type of characters, even if they aren't a part of the same class, which is always really good to see and allows a lot more expression when it comes to building teams. And I love that about Zenless right now. But yeah, that's everything in regards to both Hugo and Vivian. Both characters look amazing. I'm super excited, definitely more excited for Hugo, because I think they always go above and beyond of making a lot of the male characters very interesting and providing very strong and unique kits, and that's what I'm looking forward to the most. Vivian's probably gonna have a really good kit as well due to her being our first Ether Anomaly character, so honestly I'm just excited for both of them to see what they do. Let me know how you guys are feeling about Vivian and Hugo in the comment section below. If you couldn't tell, your boy is a little bit under the weather. It's kind of hard for me to talk right now. I actually need to stop talking in just a bit, so we're gonna get in this video off here. Remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and always remember to believe in you that believes in yourself. I'll see you guys in the next one.